V Love Hub.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of V Love Hub, Season 2. We are thrilled today to have with us live from Texas somebody who reminds us that in the midst of all this menopause activism and crusading and stoking and firing up our minds, that we women should not forget that our bodies need attention too. We are, after all, sensual creatures, and we should never lose that connection to bodily pleasure and sensuality. So Anne and I are really looking forward to having this conversation with Gabriella Espinosa, who is a women's embodiment coach and menopause mentor and a yoga and somatic movement teacher. Hi, Gabriella.
Hello, hello. Hi. Thank you so much. What a lovely introduction. I love that.
Oh, good.
Okay, so I definitely want to hear more about the work that you do, and can you just explain a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. So I'm Gabriella Espinosa, as you introduced me, and I call myself a body wisdom coach, and as you said, a menopause mentor and a pleasure educator. So my work lies at the intersection of embodiment, neuroscience, Eastern traditional wisdom, and female sexuality. It's informed by my living 56 years in my female body and about 20 years of guiding others to connect with their bodies through yoga, somatic movement, breath work, sensory exploration, all these practices which are under the umbrella of embodiment. And I facilitate one-to-one and group coaching programs. I lead retreats internationally and contribute my writing to UK and US publications.
So
Fantastic.
What is somatic movement? I have no idea what that is.
Somatic movement. So somatic movement is the ability to move from what you're sensing within your body. So it's not choreographed movement. It's not dance. It's not yoga. There's no, you're being led by your body's own internal intelligence, by your body's own internal feelings and sensations. And so I may give you a prompt like move as you're feeling. A lot of us are so disconnected from what we're feeling, but that is part of the journey of tapping into however you're feeling. If you're feeling stressed, you move as stressed. If you're feeling numb, you move as numb. If you're feeling energetic, you move as energetic. And just allowing yourself to express in whatever movement arises that which you are feeling in the moment. And so the beautiful thing about this is that it just allows you, again, to tune inwards. There's this term in neuroscience called interoception, which is the ability to feel inwards. And my mantra is the better you're able to feel your body, the better you feel about your body. So it really gives us that intuitive sense of empowerment, of knowing our bodies, of getting to know our intuitive or instincts, of knowing the wisdom that lies within, of really listening to our body. You hear so much about listening to your body. How do you do that? It is through taking time to tune into those feelings, sensations, emotions that that are carried within this amazing vessel of life called our body.
So your job in a way is to help us listen to whatever it is we are feeling, because as you said, we're so disconnected normally from how we're feeling, right?
Yes. So the guidance and practices that I offer take women on, it's a journey of self-exploration, self-knowing, self-trust, and it's not always going to be comfortable or it's not going to look pretty, right? But it's really in those places of discomfort where I believe where our greatest learning and healing lies.
And is there a timeline that you go through with people on this journey? Is it, do you offer courses for over a certain period of time, or is it just up to each individual?
I usually do one-to-one coaching, so take people
Hmm.
over a 3-month journey, whether it's one-to-one or in a group coaching
Okay.
experience. Yeah.
Okay. Great. So, how did you get into this line of work, Gabrielle? I mean, did it come from some sort of a personal experience that you had going through a change in life or whatever it was?
Well, I feel that, as I journeyed sort of the traditional path of womanhood, being all the things I thought that were expected of me, right? And I think women of my generation, we're conditioned to to always be the good girls, and certain societal and cultural expectations, especially if you journey down that traditional path, being the dutiful wife, the perfect mother, pleasing everyone and saying yes when you really meant no, and beginning to push down, right, ignore my desires. So I turned away from the things that gave me pleasure, and then
Hmm.
menopause came along. My
Hmm.
libido waned, my body changed. I lost confidence of the sensual and sexual being I once knew. So pleasure felt frivolous, it felt superficial, it didn't matter. And so when I discovered this body of work called embodied female pleasure, um, I just dove deeply into the practices, began to peel away layers of tension, stress, um, and just realizing how much my pleasure mattered, right? And
Hmm.
now at, you know, 56 years of age, and I'm 6 years postmenopausal, I feel really at home in my skin. I accept and appreciate my body. I don't always love my body. That it's always, I'm always coming back to trying to connect with my body in a way that's kind and compassionate. But I do recognize myself, and I do feel that sensuality, that that sense of being a full sensual sexual being, not the 20 or 30 or even 40-year-old version, but the 56-year-old version currently,
Hmm.
who owns her pleasure, power, and purpose. And I can really communicate my desires from a place of truth and love. And I want this for all women.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But do you find it hard to let go of the negative ideas that we've put into our minds
About bodies,
about
about
our
our bodies.
bodies, about, yes, about aging?
Yeah, I mean, it's all around us. It's so it's so hard to ignore, right? It's so hard to ignore, and of
Yeah.
course, yeah, like it starts seeping into our mindset. It starts. It. I believe that negative mindset is already part of us. It is part of us. It's, and it can creep up, but once you are able to tap um, into this essential part of being embodied, fully embodied in your pleasure, fully embodied as a sensual, sexual being. Once you get in touch with that and you
Hmm.
cultivate the relationship with that part of you, right? It's a constant practice of cultivating that part of you, because that part of us is there, right? We're encoded
Right.
as sensual, sexual beings. So it's a matter of just constantly reconnecting with that part of us, cultivating the aspects of that part of ourselves, so that we just keep quiet that voice, that critical voice. But that critical voice, you can't. It's always going to be there. It's all
Yeah.
around us. It's been ingrained in us. But it's really a matter of making the the more the more embodied, sensual, sexual aspect of our beings, um,
Hmm.
making that part of ourselves more present.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Hmm. And I know on your Instagram feed, you have some great videos that are of you moving, and they're very sensual and lovely to watch. And so, is movement a big part of this tapping into the way we feel?
Mm, movement, breath, and sound
Hmm.
are the three pillars of that I use in my practice and what I share with everyone that I coach and that who are in my coaching programs. So movement, again, it's that somatic movement aspect that I talked about earlier of being able to track how you're feeling, being able to use the movement to release, let go of what's holding you back, of what's causing you some resistance from getting in touch and connecting with your body. And then breath is a beautiful portal to connecting with our bodies as well as sound. And I love to use touch. Touch, again, is another beautiful portal for sensing, feeling, giving, and receiving. And all of this we're doing to ourselves and for ourselves, right? So I believe in really taking these practices as the first step of each person owning their pleasure, right? Owning their pleasure, because once you own your pleasure, you know what lights you up, what turns you on, what puts what puts a smile on your face, what lights that spark. Once you're able to own that for yourself, then you're better able to communicate that with another if you choose to do that. But you just show up in the world as that person, as that fully embodied person owning your pleasure.
Now, what about your platform that's called My Menopause Story? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, that's it started it is my passion project. I believe, as that we move through life with stories and narratives around key aspects of our development as women, right? That don't really serve us very well, right? And so the menopause is obviously one of them. It's been shamed and silenced for so long, and so I wanted to use that platform to elevate the voices and experiences of everyone going through menopause, and it really aims to just create this resonance of togetherness, this global, I hope, global conversation, so that no person feels alone as they're going through the transition of menopause. So it's really a celebration of stories and voices and experiences, and so that we don't feel alone as we're going through this very natural life stage.
Yeah, and it seems like it's a real community on there. I mean, you've got a lot of people on it, and
yeah, it's amazing.
So it's wonderful.
Yeah, how when we share our stories, right? It's how it resonates with so many other people. Again, it's that feeling of not being alone. It's a feeling of like, oh, even though I may feel or look different from this person or that person, we are in this journey together.
So, Paul, I mean, I have to bring something up, which is that when we go through a transition like menopause, it's not always a pleasant experience. I mean, we don't feel very good about ourselves. And so many of us will turn to eating, drinking, just sort of overdoing it on so many levels, and just to try and make ourselves feel better. So how did you go from perhaps feeling that way to tapping into this better you, or how can we do that?
It's interesting. I was thinking about this earlier, because when I was going through menopause, there wasn't the awareness that there is currently, right? I had never even heard of the word perimenopause. I barely heard of the word menopause, right? And so right now I feel, because we're trying to educate and empower people with knowledge, right? You hear so much about the symptoms, the physical symptoms, and I feel that can scare people and maybe even exacerbate the experience of whilst you're in that transition or experiencing those symptoms. And so when I was going through it, there was none of that conversation going on. So menopause for me was this just awakening on so many levels, right? Yes, there was discomfort. Yes, there was anxiety. Yes, there was low mood and rage. Yes, it was, but I didn't know it was menopause. I just thought it was just
Yeah.
moving through life. So
Right.
it just was this, I just always had this curiosity of really diving and doing a lot. I've always been into personal development and exploring what is at the root cause of anything that I'm feeling at any given moment. So I just dove into practices that served me, right? I dove into the somatic practices, the embodiment practices. I discovered different types of therapeutic practices and talk therapy practices. I just kept exploring nutrition, mindfulness. I just was looking for practices and answers that would just tend to what I needed at that moment. But I just thought, again, it wasn't this. I just saw it as I knew that there was an answer to address whatever I was feeling or sensing or experiencing in that given moment. And yeah, it was difficult, but there was a lot of learning, right? There was a lot of learning in that period of moving through menopause, which I am so grateful for. And again, it was an awakening on so many aspects: spiritual, physical, emotional, mental, energetic. So I learned so much about myself during that time. And I think I've come out the other end wiser, much wiser. And and I'm always continuing to learn and deepen my learning.
But you still have off days, right? I mean, you still have days where you don't feel great, or do you not?
There are days that I think the physical symptoms I've kind of gone over to the other side and crossed that menopausal bridge now that I'm postmenopausal. But I think right now it's still dealing with more of the emotional aspects. I'm more in touch with my emotions, right? So before I used to push them down, and menopause brought all of that up to the surface and gave me practices to really look at my emotions and to have this constant dialogue with my internal world of emotions. So there are days, when I'm, an emotion comes up, one that's come up since becoming an empty nester, and that I was not expecting, that I had never experienced before, is loneliness, right? I had this really, I don't think anything prepared me for this void, this feeling of emptiness when my kids left home, right? And it's one that I continually grapple with. And I turn to my community, I turn to friends, I turn to practices that help me investigate what's at the source of that loneliness. There's always something that's going to come up. You don't reach, you don't move through life unscathed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So the other thing is, back to menopause, is the low libido. I mean, it's very common. And I guess a lot of people would also say that they have no interest in sex at all. How do you help someone to reconnect with themselves sexually?
Yeah, that's a great question. And libido is so multifactorial. There are so many issues that affect libido. And so the way that I start with most of my clients is really offering them practices for them to get to know themselves more intimately, exploring, as I mentioned, that internal landscape of emotions, sensations, and thoughts. We move through life so much in our heads, disconnected from our bodies. So it's really a journey of guiding women to connect with their bodies and getting to know and befriend themselves, right? So
like with a mirror,
our bodies in the mirror, getting to, our bodies change, things are different for us. So it's really getting to know our bodies again, and in a different way, befriending ourselves in a different way. So, and this starts again with the realm of emotions and sensations, and then more intimately, really getting to know your intimate landscape. So exploring what turns you on and what arouses you. And it could be, you know, I don't tend to go to the genitals right away. I tend to go to what lights you up, what gives you pleasure, right? It can be a piece of music. It could be walking in nature. It could be, a piece of clothing. It could be wearing, a brightly colored lipstick like I'm wearing today. It's starting to reconnect with what gives you pleasure, and then reconnecting with your body world through touch, through movement, through breath. And then, yes, exploring more your intimate health is so important. So there could be physiological things that are going on. So I've just spoken about the emotional, more energetic aspects of libido. But physiologically, really getting to know, your vulva, your vagina, a lot of intimate self-care, moisturizing. If there are things that are showing up as pain or discomfort, I recommend seeing a doctor to see if there's any help that they can offer in terms of localized estrogen to replenish the estrogen that's already declining as we move through menopause. So there's so many different factors, but my focus is mostly in getting women to reconnect with their bodies. What turns them on, what lights them up, to really feel good in their own skin. And it does shift. It's amazing when I work with people and just give them simple practices, again, that include movement, touch, breath, sound. I notice it's visible. I can see it in their faces, in the way they move and the way they show up, right? That when they're able to make that connection and really feel more in tune with their pleasure and their desires and what lights them up, it's a huge shift. It's a huge shift in it, and it has a ripple effect, right? In their work, in their creative lives, in their relationships, and just how they show up in the world.
Yes. So is this what you call the pleasure pathways?
The pleasure pathways, yes. Yeah. So, we have to awaken new pleasure pathways as we move through menopause. So again, what worked before isn't going to work. We have to get to know our bodies and create new pleasure pathways. And this can be, again, through the different practices that I offer: movement, touch, breath, sound. And when you awaken these new pleasure pathways, you can then, be able to communicate from what arises in those pleasure pathways. So you develop a new language, right? You develop a new language, a new way of communicating. And that, again, ripples out into your intimate relationships and the way that you show up in the world.
And how important is the pelvic floor muscle in the work that you do?
So, yes, as you move through menopause, right, decline in estrogen also affects the pelvic floor. We have estrogen receptors everywhere. But also stress and also affects our pelvic floor. So when we're stressed and we're tense, we automatically tense our pelvic floors, and this can create to weakening of the pelvic floor, which can then create pain or discomfort when you're engaged in sexual intercourse, or it can also lead to other more embarrassing symptoms like incontinence. And so I do work with, again, breath, movement practices to even yoga practices to tone and strengthen and give the pelvic floor more range of movement. So it's that range of movement. The pelvic floor is a muscle. So if you're constantly tensing it, like with over too many, Kegels are usually recommended and those do work. But if you're overdoing it, that can create further weakness in the pelvic floor. So it's about providing range of movement, connecting with the pelvic floor through breath and different yoga poses that I offer in different types of movement.
There's so much to take care of.
Yeah,
we need specialists in our life. But we're coming close to the end. But I do want to bring up the fact that you are a Latina and a woman of color. So I was just wondering if you do any work around menopause specifically aimed at women of color.
Well, on my Menopause Story, on my community platform, I aim to elevate the voices of everyone going through menopause. And yes, it is still very much a taboo topic that isn't spoken about in the Latino culture. That is really my next project, to really have some very open, honest conversations in the Latino community with other Latinas about the menopause experience, not only to educate, but to empower, but really to own the experience so that they don't feel they're going through it alone. And, studies have shown that Latinas and Black women as well tend to go through menopause sooner. And if the symptoms are not addressed, which many women, doesn't matter what is your cultural origin. A lot of women, 73% of women right now do not address their menopausal symptoms. It can further exacerbate other health conditions that are more prevalent in the Latino community, such as diabetes, heart conditions,